live, guys. Welcome to our first segment of today's live clinic. I'm really excited to have 4 clinic presentations and then our head coach roundtable at 8:30. Getting it started with one I'm really excited for because using bunch is something that I've kind of dabbled in the past, but never I think invested in maybe as much as I should. So we want to make sure coach has as much time here to go through his presentation, but just a couple things for everybody who's watching. It helps us out a ton. Our first segment of today's live. I don't know why I'm getting feedback there.
We're good.
Oh, okay, good to go. Awesome. One thing that helps us out, guys, is if you like the video, the algorithm will show it to more coaches. So please help us out, help Coach Rob out, get his stuff out to as many people as we can. By liking the video. If you want to throw a comment on there, even if it's just, your name and where you're watching from, what program you're coaching with, it's a great way to make connections. We actually have had some coaches make connections with other guys in the chat that they've gone on to share more information with. So throw a comment on the video, help us out by liking the video. And then if you have any questions, throw them in the chat. Coach Ray is going to handle this first presentation with Coach Rob Fuciarelli. And really, really excited to hear more about using bunch. So thanks for making the time to be here today, Coach. And I'm going to turn it over to you guys.
Awesome. Thanks again for the invite and for having me here, guys. I really, really appreciate, again, just you asking and kind of the opportunity. Given the past year, I think all of us have been doing a lot of these like virtual clinics and probably checking out YouTube videos and all that stuff and just trying to keep our craft going. So I guess it's it's my turn to be one to do a little presentation. So again, thank you for the invite. Anybody who's watching, if you ever want to get a hold of me or anything like that, I threw my contact information up here for you. Again, my name is Rob Fuciarelli. I'm the offensive coordinator at St. Thomas More in Hamilton, Ontario. Just wanted to give a quick shout out to our coaching staff. These guys are absolutely awesome. My brothers. We've worked really hard together to build a program, and our kids have been so committed that we've definitely had some recent success. And if it wasn't for these guys and for the commitment of our kids, you probably wouldn't even be asking me to talk. But so our head coach Claudio Silvestri has been around for a long time. He is the patriarch. He started it all. So Claudia's been great. Our defensive coordinator is Coach Joe Burke. Again, he's awesome. If you've ever been able to see us play, he's the defensive mastermind. He does some really, really great stuff. Every single one of our assistant coaches, I've got everybody listed there. Our STM Twitter's on there as well. Again, I thought that it was important to talk about all these guys because really, when it comes to putting anything together, we dialogue so much that these guys are all very much a part of it. I don't even know how many times they've gotten a text from me at, who knows, it could be 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night, maybe even 1 in the morning. And I'm like, hey, what do you think about this or that? And we've dialogued at some point. So, anything that I'm talking about here, these guys have all been a huge help in that as well. So just wanted to give them a quick shout out. Okay, so in terms of using a bunch formation, I think the very first thing and that really I wanted to talk about is when you're putting this together, you got to figure out what your purpose is. Why are you doing it? So you got to ask yourself, why are we doing this? You ask yourself, what are you trying to do? What are you trying to accomplish? And that's very personal. It's your own philosophy. It's going to be about the players that you have and that sort of thing. But the one thing I'll say is don't just run it just to do it. There's bunch formations that you'll see in every level, college and in the CFL and the NFL, you name it. And it might look good, but if it's not going to fit you or your team, then maybe it's not something that you do. But if it's something that you think is going to be useful and whatever it is you want to get accomplished, then yeah, it can be a great tool. So the next thing is if you are going to run a bunch, you probably want to ask yourself, what kind of bunch do I want to run? So like what type? Do you want to run a triangle if you're in a trips? Do you want to run, a triple stack if you're in a trips? Do you want to run a quad bunch? And that's kind of like a diamond look. The other look that I have here that I've definitely seen before is they'll run like an inside bunch with the outside receiver free. But again, very much to you. Other questions that you want to ask yourself are going to be, do you want to run a tight bunch right to the to your offensive line? Do you want to run a wide bunch, or do you want to do it somewhere in between? The next question that you might want to ask yourself is, am I going to use a tight end? So if you're going to use a tight end, same thing. Is he going to be right beside my tackle? Is he going to be more of a split end? Where do you want to put him? Do you want to put him on the backside? Again, questions that really only you can answer in terms of what you want to get done. The other thing you might want to ask is do you want to use motion, or do you want to start in the bunch? I'll say that we've the couple clips that I have here. There's I know I have at least one look that I can think of off the top of my head where we are motioning into it. But sometimes motioning into it is not what you want, because you might want to see what the defense is going to do beforehand, and you'd rather not motion into it. Again, very, very personal. That might depend on your quarterback, the receivers, all that kind of stuff. And those are questions that, I can't answer. You'd have to answer, again, on your own when you're developing this. The next thing I want to talk about is personnel. And this kind of also goes into the, don't just do it to do it. If you don't have the personnel to run this or accomplish whatever it is that you want to get done, then yeah, maybe this just isn't the look for you. A bunch formation might not be the thing that you need to do. And then, some more questions that you got to start asking yourself is, who goes where? So, if you've decided the kind of bunch that you want to run, who are you going to put in these particular positions? So if you're going to, widen out a little bit, where do you want your athletes, right? Why do you want them in that particular spot? What kind of, plays or designs do you have to get them the ball? The next thing you might want to ask, who has the best hands? And then again, where do you want him, right? Do you want him in your bunch? Do you want him on your ISO side? Where in the bunch do you want him, and how you're going to, look to get him the ball, or the reasons that you want him in that particular spot. One thing I'll say as far as a pointer is, whoever your point man is in the bunch, that guy's got to be pretty smart, and he's got to be pretty tough. He can't be afraid to be physical. Not to knock receivers too much, but sometimes that can be difficult. They sometimes don't like to necessarily get their noses dirty as linemen. So, the guy who is your point man, though, he's going to have to be ready if they do decide to jam it to get off of that. And then again, when it starts coming to the releases and that sort of thing, he's got to be pretty smart to not get in the way of the guys that are behind him and that sort of thing. So, that's definitely something you should probably consider as far as whoever your point is. The next question, who's your fastest receiver? And again, you're asking yourself the same question. Where do you want him? Why do you want him there? Again, do you want him as your ISO guy because, he can burn a guy at the sidelines? Then that might be it. Maybe he's the inside guy in your bunch and you want him there because you want to get it up the seam, or maybe he's the outside guy in the bunch because you want to get him up the outside. Again, that would be something that you'd have to decide, and however you design, your bunch. But again, a question that, and obviously I'm putting these out there because these are things that, I was asking myself, I was asking the other coaches when we were designing this, how do we want to get this all put together? I talked about the ISO man, the ISO man in the bunch. What do you want to do with him? I mentioned if he's the tight end, then, why do you want him there? Why do you want him in that spot? If you're going to widen him out, again, same thing. Is he there because he's your best jump ball guy, your best athlete, your fastest guy? I mean, if it's a guy who's a combination of all of them, then, it's great. But you got to ask yourself, why do I have that guy there? And then the other thing that I really haven't mentioned too much, and that gets kind of lost in it, is, your backs. So what kind of backfield alignment do you want? Obviously if you're in a quad, automatically you're going to have an ace backfield. But if you're going to run any type of trips, again, what formation do you want? Why do you want your backs in those particular positions? And then also, how does that all kind of relate to your base offense? Again, this would be all things that I would say that you should be asking yourself again, that we were asking ourselves when we were putting this stuff together. And then the question is going to come up. How will the defense react? And this is my absolute honest answer: is you really do not know until you actually run it, until you're in a game. The defense can react in so many different ways. I really do think that I think defenses in Canada are much more diverse, a little bit more creative. I think that they're also not necessarily as regimented in some of their rules, which also makes it a little bit more difficult to kind of prep, regardless of what you're doing, whether you're using a bunch or not. I couldn't necessarily come on here and say, okay, you know what, if you run this type of a bunch, this is what the defense is going to do, because you really don't know. A lot of it is going to become, in your prep going into a game, how do they react to, if you are in, again, if it's a 3-man bunch, if it's a 3x1 type of bunch, how do they normally react to a 3x1 look? If it's 3x2 bunch, how would they react to a 3x2 look? The 4x1, all the same kind of things. What kind of front do they run? What types of coverages do they run? That's all kind of the prep that you would have to do beforehand, to kind of figure that out. The next couple questions that you might want to be asking yourself is, are they going to jam the bunch side, right? Or do they not jam the bunch? Again, that's going to vary. It might depend on, the defensive coordinator, their philosophy, and kind of what they want to do and how they want to defend it. But again, I couldn't come on here and just say, this is exactly what's going to happen. Next, you're on your ISO side. Are they jamming that guy? Are they giving him a release? And again, I'll get into alignments in 1 second, but how's that all come into play as well? The next one, who's the low man on the bunch side? Is it the half? Is it the corner? It could even be a linebacker. Again, some of the clips that I have that I'm going to get to, you're going to see that there's a couple different teams that we play, and they all reacted differently. They really did. And I know right off the top of my head, I can think of one clip where a backer's coming out. I can think of a clip where the half is, and I'm almost positive there's one where the corner is. But again, it really depends on who you're playing. Next, shades and alignments of all the secondary players. That's the next thing that you have to look at, because that really does matter. So, in terms of the route combinations and the plays that you have in, how is that going to affect, the releases of all your guys on the bunch side, and obviously also on your ISO side. Because it's great to draw stuff up on paper, but the second that it's a person that a receiver has to run through or whatever it is, now the complexities kind of start. Again, taking a look at those shades and alignments can definitely come into play. And then, I mentioned this before with thinking about the running backs and your backfield formation, and now you got to take a look at the alignments that are going to be in the box. So, and again, how do they react? Are they going to bring a linebacker out of the box? Because that's going to change the numbers in there. Are they shifting one way or the other, depending on the field, depending on the bunch, all those different things. Because again, every defense is a little bit different. The next thing, are they changing personnel? So if you change personnel, are they changing personnel? Do they change personnel anyways if they know that you've been running it a little more often than not, let's say, because that can come into play. And, where is that change happening? Again, like, are they subbing in are they subbing on a linebacker and bringing another DB? What is it? How are they doing that? Are they changing their base defense in any way? Because if they're not, and the prep that you have going into the game, obviously it's going to make it a little bit easier for you. But if they are in any way, again, these are questions that you're asking. The other thing that I should point out as well is, as I'm going through all this, when you're developing this and when you're executing these things, your players really do have to have an understanding of what you're trying to accomplish, because all these things that I'm asking now, especially when it comes to in-game, you're going to have to ask them. You're going to have to say, because how it might look in the booth, how it might look from the sideline, that can be very, very different than, how your player's kind of feeling that, or seeing it when he's lined up. You might think, okay, well, because of the alignment of the half here, I don't think we can get inside him. But your receiver might say, you know what, his eyes are so locked on me that I can give him a little bit move and I can get inside, no problem. Well, now that kind of changes things a little bit. So your receivers need to know, what you're trying to get done. Your quarterback needs to know what you're trying to get done as well. And then in terms of the defenses, again, a 4-3 or a 5-2, a 3-4, that, they all essentially have, one safety high. They're going to look and react very different than, a 4-2 or 4-4 or a 3-5 or 3-3 type of stack that has two safeties. And again, how they're all rotating to that, to your bunch is going to vary. All right. One thing that's similar is that, is that they're one or two high, but technically they can all play some form of zone. They can all play man, or they can play a combo of both, right? Like kind of almost like a match or quarters type of concept as well. And then it comes down to, how are they doing it? And again, I started this and I want to mention again that alignments are absolutely crucial, because how they're aligned to the bunch side, to the ISO side, can very much matter in terms of, again, what you want to get done, where you want to attack. So that the alignments are very important. Now, it's interesting that when I was talking to Coach about doing this, just a week or two ago, when we were talking about some topics, I thought about the bunch formation, and sure enough, through my Twitter feed, what comes up is a Glazer clinic, and they were showing some clips of Nick Saban talking about defending the bunch, and he talked about two different looks, I guess they have at Alabama, they call interstate and traffic. Not that I'm going to go into each one of them, but he goes into, if you get a chance to see these videos, he talks about both of these looks that are defenses that they do to defend their bunch, to defend the bunch. And then right after he goes through all these, he says, but there's other ways you can play it. So I thought that was funny, because I had this slide pretty much done after I had heard this video or saw this video, and I thought, well, this is exactly what I'm trying to say, is that, sure, you got Nick Saban here talking about how they defend the bunch, and it's really two different ways that he speaks of, and then he finishes it off with saying you could actually do it in other ways. So there's not really I can't give you a photocopied version like you see a bunch and here's how a defense is going to react. All right. And it does come through a lot of experimenting. After you've done some research on the bunch, because I'm sure that you're not going to necessarily just draw stuff up right after I'm done talking here. You'll probably dive in a little bit more and see what other people have done. You got to draw a lot, and I've definitely used a lot of paper in a lot of different looks, but this one in particular. My best resource, without a doubt, has been the defensive coordinators I've worked with. At STM, as I mentioned, our defense coordinator is Joe Burke, and he does such a great job. And he does a great job. One of the things that as soon as I got on at STM, I noticed with him is that the way that he can break down a team is amazing, and really incredible. So when I went to drawing this stuff up, I would give him tons of different looks and say, okay, how would you defend this? And then I start with the whys. Why would you do this? Why would you do that? Why is he here? Why is he there? What do you think about this? What if I put that guy here? And it's honestly just nonstop trial and error. I have had the opportunity as well to coach rep in Hamilton, and Coach Underhill, Rob Underhill, was our head coach, and again, a good friend of mine. And he got the same treatment from me in terms of a lot of drawing things up. Why are guys going here or there? Adam Grandy, same thing. Coach Cameron, Dwayne Cameron. I had the opportunity to coach Team Ontario a couple of times, and with Coach Cameron. I do have one or two clips from when we ran this against Team USA, actually. And same thing. I remember him and I having discussions about stuff like this in the at breakfast a couple of times when we were down in Texas. And then Brent Munson, who's the defense coordinator for Calgary Stampeders now, again has been a great resource as well in terms of just me bouncing ideas off and stuff like that. But the reason I'm bringing these guys up is because you have your own defense coordinators. You probably have a network of other defensive coordinators as well, and reaching out to them as a resource was an absolutely huge help for me. And these guys all are definitely part of how it kind of developed where the bunch list that I ended up coming up with, or I should say we ended up drawing up. When it comes to building your playbook, I'm sure that everybody at some point has heard of the KISS philosophy, right? Keeping it simple. So they keep it simple, stupid. And really, I feel like the challenge ends up becoming that you don't want to overdo it. So you ask yourself all these questions. You think about all the different things that the defense can do, and eventually you're going to have to filter it down to what is going to really fit into your offense, fit into your playbook. At the end of the day, I mean, you're coaching high school kids, so you're going to say, like, how much are they going to take in, because you don't want to blow any circuits or anything like that and make them think start overthinking things or whatever, because then it's just going to become a complete mess. So really the challenge starts to become that you don't want to overdo it. So whatever you kind of put in your arsenal, both run and pass, the answers should cover multiple possibilities. And if you've drawn a couple of things up and you start hitting a couple of roadblocks, I guess, like, my suggestion would be, then you kind of got to go back and say, okay, well, maybe this isn't it then, because we got to find something else to kind of kill two birds with one stone type of thing. Because if you don't, then your playbook, your call sheet is going to be huge, and it's going to be pointless because you're not going to be able to work on it. Your kids aren't going to be able to perfect it and know what you're trying to get accomplished. It's going to be, a bit of a mess. The next thing I put on here is, and I've heard it specifically from two different coaches. Rich Rodriguez talked about this. He was the first one that I heard in a clinic quite a while ago, talking about numbers, angles, and grass. And then we had an opportunity to go to Penn State a couple years ago when Joe Moorhead was the offensive coordinator. He's at Oregon now, and I have also heard a couple of his presentations since he's left Penn State. And one thing that he continues to emphasize in all of his talks are, that they're going to look for numbers, angles, and grass, and essentially that's how they're going to attack a defense. And really, that's what, I mean, I guess you could say it comes down to with any offense. But when it comes to the bunch, these are things that you're going to start asking yourself now. So, I talked about alignments a lot and shades and all that. And now that's where this is all going to come into play, right? So, like, where do you have numbers? If you got numbers in the box, then it should be obvious that you should be running the ball. If you have numbers to the bunch side, then you should be throwing to the bunch side because you've got the numbers. If you have a good ISO matchup, then that's what you would be taking. You'd be taking the ISO matchup. But again, those are things that are going to come through that trial and error. Okay, so I talked about experimenting and drawing things up and all that, and really that's kind of where this is all going to kind of come into play, and some things I would say you should keep in mind. So what have we done? So basically, what we've done is it's basically a triangle bunch, all right, with the two back offset eye. When we've been in the U.S. and used it, basically it's ended up being we ended up packaging it. So basically the fullback came out, and it was a 3x1 bunch with an ace backfield. Again, the couple clips that I have from Team Ontario, that was the case, and that's and again that we went to the ace. We ran it both out of the gun and under center. I personally, I mean, again, this is very much, everyone's going to have their own philosophy on it. I like to run, my looks out of both. If you're just a gun team, then, sure, you run it just at a gun. If you're, purely on a center, same kind of thing. But then again, in terms of your play design, and playbook structure, now you got to keep all that stuff in mind as well. In terms of alignment, and again, this is just the way that we did it. The point man on the bunch side and the ISO side, we had each line up inside the numbers. If we were on a hash, basically it would move over. All right. So if we're on a hash, then both sides end up splitting the difference. And what I mean by that is, and I already know in a couple of clips, the kids got a little bit undisciplined with it. But if we end up on one hat on the left hash in the picture you're seeing here, then the ISO man, okay, he's going to end up splitting the difference between the sidelines and the numbers. Okay, and then the bunch side is going to end up splitting the difference between essentially the numbers and the tackle. Okay, I'll say right now, I know right off the bat, it's not perfect. There's some examples that are really good. Actually, the kids were very disciplined in it, but it's definitely something you got to work on. And then again, I started this by saying, talking about a purpose and asking yourself why you did it. So, why do we really start to use the bunch? We've definitely been I definitely want to run. We definitely want to run the ball. I think running the ball is so crucial in football. Anybody who's a huge air raid fan, I'm sure that I just broke your heart. Sorry about that. But when teams were starting to stack the box a lot against us, we're trying to think of different ways to open that up. And we thought that using the bunch might be an idea. The problem we had was that at the time we had a couple of quarterbacks, and each of them, their arm strength was I'll say so-so. So having a super wide bunch wasn't necessarily great because getting the ball way out there was going to be a bit of a problem. So we had to kind of find a balance between spreading the defense out as well as being a threat to actually get the ball to those guys. So again, that's where a lot of trial and error came in. What kind of route combinations do we want? How are we going to get each guy the ball, and in what scenario and all that? But really, what it came down to was, our strength was very much in our running game, and we needed a way to open it up a little bit more. And that's kind of where this all started. And that really is kind of the root of it. Now, from there, I'll say that it evolved a little bit. And as we started doing this, and our quarterbacks were getting a little bit better, we were able to run a couple more, taking some more deep shots and running some more deeper concepts and that sort of thing. So now we were kind of able to utilize it in a few different ways. So it wasn't just necessarily opening up the run game. We were able to get the ball out to some athletes in space and that sort of thing. So it kind of evolved after it initially kind of came into play. All right. Okay. So, in terms of your pass play structure, and again, this is just kind of the way that, I guess you could say I kind of looked at it in terms of if I'm drawing this on a piece of paper, or kind of the vision I have, would have in my mind is, there's 7 zones or areas of the field that essentially, it's like, okay, how do I get a guy there, right? And who is it that I want to get there? So, the first zone that I would say that I would be looking at is, the line of scrimmage to basically like 1 to 2 yards or so. All right. So it's pretty tight. And how am I going to get there, and how much do I want to get there? The next zone I'm looking at is kind of 5 to 7 yards from the line of scrimmage. And again, looking from the hash to the sideline. The next one would be 7 to 12 yards. Okay. And then anything above that, right? So 12 plus. So obviously now you're looking at some of your deep shots. And then of course, down the middle, you're looking at, again, 5 to 7 yards off the line of scrimmage. Okay. And again, how am I going to get a guy there? When do I want to get him there? And that sort of thing. And now you're looking, 7 to 12 in the middle, and then again, down the deep middle. Okay. The next thing that I wanted to show you, and I'm going to steal this term. I did mention Coach Munson with the Stampeders, and it's one thing that I hear him say a lot is, sometimes he uses the term "play basketball." Now, I played basketball my whole life, so for me, it was very applicable, and I think there's a lot of truth to it. And that's essentially kind of like what you have to end up doing. And, to make it easy, and, again, coming from a bit of a basketball background, if a team's going to play a zone, usually I want to overload that zone. I want to get somebody moving through it, that sort of thing. If a team's playing man, then you're going to look at, a lot of picks, you're going to look at rubs, and then also you want to look at matchups. Sometimes and I know I'm using a basketball reference, but it's very true. Sometimes you'll watch a basketball team and they're just trying to isolate a guy. They know that they got a really good matchup. They want to get him the ball. Everyone else moves away and they're just trying to get him the ball. It might happen. And then, another scenario might be, again, you want to set up one of your other players. So how do you do that? Could be a pick, could be a rub, whatever, but it's very much a basketball type of philosophy there. Now the next thing I want to show you, and again, this is really just one kind of potential look that you could get, all right, in terms of like how, a team might react to your bunch. And this is one of the looks that we would have got. All right. And you can see the half of this actually not jamming the bunch a little bit off. They've kept the Sam inside. They've rolled the backside half up a little bit to take anything, like a deep post or something away there from our ISO guy. In terms of how they ended up dropping into it. And again, this is just one thing that they could possibly do. They could drop into essentially just a cover 3 look, like we have here. This is just one thing that we could have seen. Now, if they do that and then they're in a zone, then what do I want to do to get after those zones, right? Like on the backside there, if I know that, this corner is already locked on my ISO guy, and then on top of that, I got this half rolling up here, right? And you still got a Wilson in the box. I mean, getting him the ball is going to be pretty difficult. So I don't know if that's going to be great. But now on this side, how do I want to take advantage of, one of these areas, right? Of again, one of these zones, and which guy do I want to pick on? And for what reason? Because, you also don't want to, like, you might say, okay, well, I'm going to go after, this deep third over here, but then this corner might be a baller and trying to, he might be able to defend 2 guys that you try to flood the zone with. So you might not want to flirt with that disaster. Again, how are you going to answer that question? Now are you going to go after the free? Are you going to do something a little bit shorter in one of the other zones? Again, how are you going to do that? But, again, I really like the way that Coach Munson used the play basketball terminology. So I thought that I would use it here, and it's very much that way. And then the next thing I wanted to talk about is, having patience. It takes a lot of time. It really does take a lot of time. And you have to be ready for it to not look pretty. There's going to be some ugliness, and it's everything. It's from route running. It's from getting off the jams that I talked about. It's from, how your quarterback is going to read it. It's how your receivers have to understand, what their job is in terms of the route combination that you have. And that sort of thing. And it takes a lot of trial and error. I did talk about that. You have to work on your spacing. You have to work on your timing, how they're going to react to the defense. And again, throwing this out to your kids in practice is so crucial, because they have to be able to see it before, you get into a game, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, I've never seen this before. What do I do? And it does take a lot of time. Now, going back to, structuring your playbook and that sort of thing, again, you got to keep this in mind, because it's like, okay, I know I'm gonna have to work on this in practice. So how much extra do I want to put on top of my kids? How much time do I want to put on it? And, am I going to mesh now a lot of, my base philosophy and things we do with the bunch, so it's not too much. If your guys can handle it, then yeah, sure. If you want to pile it on, then you can, but it might be tricky, and it might become very time consuming. But I would say that if you're going to do something like this, you have to commit to it. So you got to build time into every practice to work on it. Okay, So I got a couple clips now, and thought I'd get into a couple of examples to show you guys. So the clip I have here, you can see that we're running the bunch to the short side. Okay, and I wanted you guys to see. It's pretty much every offensive coordinator's dream seeing a defense react late and kind of having the oh crap moment, which these guys are having here. So that in itself is great. However, on top of that, I want you to just, you can take a look here and see what happens. Okay. So, not only are they bringing their half down, they brought their Sam right out and gave us great numbers up over here. All right. So we have a guard basically running for a safety, on our play here. So, this was great. I mean, this is exactly the, the numbers and angles. And again, this is how, these guys reacted to it. Another team definitely can react different. You'll see. Now this is a little bit different. So, in this look here, you can't see the safety. He's out of the picture here, but he's pretty deep. So, right off the bat that, these guys are worried about us throwing deep. So if that's the case, then, I mean, I hope that it's common sense that you don't do it then, because, if they're ready for it, then you want to do something opposite. Now, the other thing, you'll see that this is actually their halfback. And you can see in my opinion, he's rolled up pretty high. He's about 10 yards off here. And this is actually their end. Okay. And their will is out here. So I'll play this through. Sorry, other way around. Okay. The will was inside, the end was off the line there. Okay. And you'll see once again, all right, numbers work very much into our favor to the side, to the opposite side there. Okay. So, I mean, if this ends up being a one-on-one essentially with our running back and a half, who's that far off, then, I mean, we've essentially, we got a first down. So I'm going to take that, and if you got a back that can do that, then that's going to help you a little bit more. But, just with our numbers and angles, again, essentially it ends up being a win. Just even before the snap, you can kind of see it pre-snap on how this is going to play out. Coach, are there any questions? I guess I didn't really stop yet.
Yeah, no, we're coaches are definitely in there talking formations. I'm just, I'm really loving the, just the idea of keeping it simple and the numbers, angles, and grass. I think there's a lot of coaches that can be stubborn, and if they have a concept in the, that they've been practicing all week and they get into that bunch formation, they're going to try to throw it.
Yeah.
It is great to see, if you see a halfback 10 yards off the line of scrimmage, you want to go run the football. That's awesome. For me, the play basketball is, I think, such a great way, if you're new to coaching or you're just, you're trying to find your process. I haven't seen that before. And that's a fantastic way to organize yourself and look at what you're trying to attack. I thought that was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, and again, I got to give credit to Coach Munson on that one. I didn't invent it, but I definitely jumped all over it, being a basketball player myself. I thought it was a really, really great way to say it. And I mean, and here's a guy at the pro level that's, how he's coaching his guys, and he'll use the same basically idea or rationale, and it makes perfect sense. So yeah, no, it's great.
No, that's awesome. And again, personnel wise for you, is it, when you're looking at it, how are you determining, looking at this clip from an American field, how do you like to kind of juggle that in terms of, you've asked the coaches, it's going to be different for everyone, but personally for you, what do you find works when you're kind of your bunch?
Well, I will say that. So the other thing that I'll get to is this is actually each of these looks that I've shown. The first two that I've shown is from 3 different seasons, actually. Well, I shouldn't say that. This is from one season. This is the next, and then the one from Team O would have been from this year as well. But everything was a little bit different, and so I mean, a perfect example is with. Sorry, let me go back to the first clip again. So over here. In terms of, again, when we were putting this in, our quarterback's arm strength wasn't fantastic. It really wasn't. But we still obviously had ways to get them the ball. But like I said, we wanted him to run the ball. And obviously in this situation, it worked out very well. You jump forward, and like I said, how there's an evolution to this. We run it a year later. We got a really good group of young receivers. We had, a guy who we thought was a really good ISO man, and now, again, things evolved a little bit. So now we had, we really did have different ways, to get each one of these guys the ball, him the ball, run the ball, but it all kind of corresponded to like what our base offense was. And so, I mean, again, philosophically, I'll say that, it didn't change too much in terms of like, I mean, I really think that like when you break down football, if you can run the ball, then I mean, it's obviously also the low risk play. And you've got numbers, you should do it. So, and obviously that's why, that happens in these clips here. But again, in terms of like the rationale for where each guy's where, it's kind of what I was saying, like our point man here. So I don't know how many people know Savon. Savon is at Western now, and right off the bat, and you can see he's not the biggest guy, but he is such a great technical receiver, and he could get off the jams and understand all the things I was talking about in terms of what his release needed to be, so things wouldn't be affected by these guys so well. That's why he ended up in that spot. And again, it definitely changed. Like, one thing that I try to do every year is I go right back to the drawing board, and it's like, okay, so what was good, what was bad, what do I want to do or change from here? So, I mean, from year to year, it does change a little bit. So hopefully that answers your question.
No, absolutely, absolutely. We actually have a couple questions coming in through the live chat now. Coach Butler wants to know, what's the benefit of bunch over your regular trips formation?
Well, I'd say for sure that like I was saying, like for us, it was stretching the defense out. If you're in a regular trips formation, if really there's the only ways the defense really can react to trips is you're either going to bring the Sam out, the half over, or the free down, or have kind of a rotation to it. And if you're in a regular trips, then whoever's over your number 3, he can end up being a real pain when it comes to if you're trying to run the ball on that side. Whereas if you spread him out with the bunch, then that does stretch him out a little bit. So that's definitely a benefit. But then, so that's the run game benefit. Pass game benefit is if you've got one of those defenders who is not necessarily, he might be one of their weaker defenders, and now all of a sudden you can create a nice little matchup. Like, I'm going to show you guys a couple of hitch passes that we throw to a couple of our guys there. And you could capitalize on that. Well, now you would just put the ball way out near the sidelines, and you've got, 2 of their guys or 3 of their guys trying to make a tackle with a couple of blockers way out on the sidelines versus, somewhere where there's a lot of traffic and linebackers can come and help and that sort of thing. So, I mean, that's kind of my answer to that one.
No, that's awesome. No, and one of the things I love out of the bunch, especially like you're talking about when you're, especially at the high school level, your arm strength varies so much. I think it's a great way to condense the field and still give yourself lots of options in the pass game as well. You can get you guys to walk inside the numbers, especially up here, and you're going to put yourself in a great spot. I'll let you roll. We got a couple other questions that we'll get to here in a few minutes.
Okay, sounds good. Now, this clip here, so I'm gonna be completely honest with you guys. When we were going to Texas and we were playing Team-O here, we did not. I'll be as nice as possible. We did not have the talent level we expected that came up to our tryout. I'll give these kids, they worked hard, they did, and they did what they were asked and that sort of thing. But we had to find ways to get our most talented guys the ball. And when it came to me running the bunch here, our receiver who's down at the bottom here, I got another clip I'll show you where we get him on an ISO. And then our running back, who little guy, but he ran the ball really, really well, really, really tough. If I could show this entire game and some of the clips of this guy ran the ball, he actually had a pretty good game. And really that's what we wanted to do. No offense to these guys, but to be honest, our focus was not to get them the ball. It was really to try to open up the box a little bit. And then if anything, try to get him on an isolation. The other reason I wanted to show this clip, and I'll run it through and you'll see exactly why. I'm sorry it's a little bit grainy, okay, is it's not perfect. And this is where I want to talk about the patience, okay? Now, we can argue this to the death a little bit. In my personal opinion, I really think that our quarterback did a terrible job on this zone read, okay? And as the end committed, I really think that he could have taken this ball and it could have been a one-on-one with this guy and he should have had a touchdown. That's my personal opinion right off the bat. But I'm sure quarterback coaches might argue me on that one and say, no way. But I really think he could have. The other thing is you'll see on the left side of this, okay, our back makes a really bad read. Now, granted, okay, we don't have a fantastic block here, all right? But if he gets his foot in the ground, okay, and he falls up the left side, you'll see their end drops off to cover in the bunch. Which if you ever do end up, I mean, we go to the States once a year with STM, and that's another great thing actually. That's our head coach Claudio Silvestri's arranged ever since he actually started way back in the early 2000s are those games in the States. But if you do get an opportunity to go to the States and you end up running it, you understand that the condensed field changes everything. And this is a perfect example, right? You got a defensive end who essentially can drop off and become a pain in the butt in defending, your bunch here. So he drops off, which is awesome. And you can see if our back puts his foot in the ground, he has at least a shot to get a couple of yards, if not get his head down and bust through this seam. He doesn't. All right. Now, again, I showed this I thought this clip was good for both of these things that I wanted to mention to you. Well, I guess I should say three things. First, you can kind of see the look at the ace, the ace backfield. I wanted to talk about the patience because these things take time. You know, if I had more than a week to prep these guys, then, could we have, worked something like this out and iron this out for sure. And then also I wanted to talk about how my rationale was a little bit different when we ran it here versus some of the ones that I showed you previously. So that's one of the reasons I wanted this clip. I know that. And the other thing is that, I've listened to a lot of clinics before. I've been to a lot of clinics. I've listened to a lot of videos. And I think that showing some imperfections is also important. Things aren't always perfect. And exactly like, I personally think that, here, and you might call a great play. And I think that really this should have gone one way or the other, the quarterback or the running back. But sometimes that happens, and kind of it is what it is. You got to kind of live another day. Okay, so I'm going to move ahead to the next one. Once again, you have a completely different way that a team is reacting to our bunch. Okay, again, at this point, these guys have run this look a little bit. I will say that this receiver, we had an injury, so you can see that when we called this in, his split isn't great. He should have actually been a little bit tighter. But when we were playing these guys, we had noticed I did tell you that we, it wasn't necessarily a secret that, we had a pretty good running back and we were, we did like to run the ball. So they tried to stack the box a little bit. You can see how low, essentially, this may as well be a linebacker. It's more or less kind of like a strong safety, but it may as well be a linebacker for how tight he was. And you can see how low they were playing the bunch over here. They're not staggered in any way. I did mention how Nick Saban talked about their interstate and traffic, and the way that he was talking about it was basically is two of the guys that were off the bunch, they start playing almost like a match game. And when one receiver breaks inside, one will go with that one, and then the other will go with the outside guy. And you'll see, and they're basically they're staggered. They're not. These guys are like, they're three in a line here, right? But what this did for us is you can see that the field side is very, very open right now, with these guys obviously rotating all the way over the bunch. On top of that, essentially, I'm saying strong safety because typically those strong safeties are good run supporters, but he's a safety that's really low in the box, however you want to say that. He's pretty much a linebacker, was also on this side of the hash. So I'll let this play out. Again, they were very focused on our run. You can see we run a counter play. They bite on it. Okay, it opens up those numbers and angles I was talking about. All right. No offense to my buddy Joe O'Brien up there, our receiver. He did a good job stepping in for us, but if he makes this block, it should be a touchdown. And he kind of misses it. It happens. But you can see that, really this, at the end of the day, we ended up using it to our numbers advantage, right? They rotated so hard over. They were so focused on our run game. I'm going to show you another clip from this game as well that where it helped later on. But it really opened up the other side of the field for us, and obviously it was a huge play. This might have been one of the first times we used this, okay? And as I mentioned, here we were motioning into the bunch. I'll say there's an upside, there's downsides, and I mean I can talk for hours about that. But here, as I mentioned, we I told you that we wanted to spread things out a little bit, but on top of that, we needed to try to get these guys the ball somehow. And you'll see right here. Okay, so we're running basically that should have been a slant. Sorry. Okay, so what ends up happening here? Our receiver's running a slant. He sees how the backer's expanding. Okay, right there to get. Oh, geez, sorry. And then he just gets over top of him. All right. And again, sorry, you can't see the rest of the routes really on the clip here. Okay, but you can see we're hitting right in between the window here. So the linebacker over expands. Okay. All right, we get a nice completion. This is not that far down the field. All right. Like it may look like it. All right. But at the end of the day, right, where does he catch this ball? Essentially, just about 10 yards from the line of scrimmage or so. Okay, it's really not that far, down the field. All right, not too difficult of a throw, pretty easy read for a quarterback. For this quarterback in particular, he really liked our quick slant game. It was one of his favorite reads, and I'm not going to lie, that's one of the main reasons why I went with this look, because it was easy for him to read, we knew that they wanted to stop our run game. We needed them to respect it, and there you go. It really is not that deep of a pass. It's nothing super fancy, but it's enough now that they would have to worry, about us throwing that ball. Okay, so this look here. All right, now I did mention, okay, that getting your athletes, okay, your guys who you think can run, a solid one-on-one in space can be a huge advantage. So again, team stack in the box, no surprise. Okay. As I'm playing this through, you see that they got two guys out here. All right. Now we don't have a great block. Okay. You're going to see here. All right. Not a fantastic throw. All right. But if we get that block, all right, it's essentially a one-on-one up the sidelines. All right. And that should have been an easy first down for us. So I know, I know it's not perfect, right? Not exactly how you draw it up, but you can see, sorry guys. You can see how this is shaping up. Okay, so we get our kick out here. All right, we're lined up right here, and if he catches this clean, I know not a great throw. If he catches this clean, he has a seam right here. Now, I don't necessarily need a touchdown on every play, but was I going for a first down? Absolutely. If he catches that clean and we get a nice block, that should have been an easy first down. Okay. So that was an ISO to you saw one of our guys who was not the point man. He was one of the he was our slot there standing at the back. Now here, okay, you're going to see we went the other way around. So basically we block for the point man here because this is who we wanted to get the ball. And now we're going to have a block here. All right. We have a block there, and you can see there's no one else out there. All right. And here we go. All right. He makes a pretty good read. I would have preferred that he busted that out to the sideline a little bit quicker before that backer became an issue. He didn't really make a great play on it. Okay. But again, that's an athlete. You want to get the ball in some space. All right. And it's honest to God that simple. All right.
That's great. And I think the screen game out of the bunch is so interesting, and you can do a bunch of really unique things with it, whether you're tunneling back with it. You get some confusion, if you feel like you have a dominant athlete on the point too, that makes a huge difference.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Do want to get to a quick question from Coach Joe here. He says he doesn't like to carry over the same route stems from week to week. from bunch. How do you like to game plan your bunch week to week?
Again, like I was saying, like for me personally, that goes back to honest to God, the beginning of the season. And what I mean by that is I've got to know what I'm going to go into the season with and how I'm going to go after different things. So, and again, when I'm structuring, the whatever it is I want to get done in our bunch looks, I'm going to say to myself, if a team does, and then I'm going to give myself as many scenarios as I can. What am I going to do? And, in terms of like the plays that we have in, how does that correspond with what we want to get done just in general? And then now how can I use the bunch to my advantage with those plays? So me personally, I'm not going to go and draw up a whole new look for 1 week. What I will do is I might tweak something. So if we've got a concept in, I might say, okay, well, normally when you're running, like I showed you the clip there of the slant that our receiver was running, but it essentially was deep. So, and that's an adjustment because it ended up almost looking like kind of like a short post. So, you're not really changing a play in that instance. So, if I was prepping a team and I knew that, all it was going to take was, okay, we're going to, skinny this post, fatten that post, that sort of thing. And those are little adjustments in the play concept I have, then yeah, maybe I would change things that way, but I'm not going to change our entire playbook or concepts from week to week necessarily. I am going to take a look at obviously what the defense is doing, and then I'm going to go back to, okay, well, what do we do to get this done? Now, I will say that if I can grab, like if there's a route combination we haven't necessarily worked on in the bunch, but we have it like kind of in our catalog, if you will, and I think it will work well and it's an easy transition, will I put that in and work on it? Yeah, I might do that. But I'm not going to necessarily go in and put in something completely random for that week.
Awesome. No, that's a great point. And I think, as adjustments to your route tree and different depths is such an important thing to take a look at going into a game plan.
Yeah. So now for this clip, I wanted to show you guys going after the ISO. All right. Now, again, this is a pretty talented receiver. If there was a receiver that we knew we had to get the ball to one way or another, it was him throughout this game. He made a couple of nice catches, and this is one of them. And I'm going to play this one out. I'll go back and forth. So now you're going to see here. All right. So they're very much, again, these guys were very much concerned about our run game. Okay. So he comes up, and now I've essentially got an ISO with him over here. All right. And it doesn't get much it's a great ball, right? It's a great catch. All right. But it's essentially exactly what this is designed for. All right. If you're going to go after the ISO, and you've designed it for this purpose, that's when you use it. Right. Sorry, again, I know that's not the best clip. All right. But what ends up happening is that corner bites on that inside move. All right. So he knows that he's got to get to the sideline. All right. And essentially, okay, he's stemming him inside, right, to get him, okay, to obviously bite inside for some type of an inside move, and he breaks it back out, and the quarterback puts it in a great spot. All right. And this play actually set up that other play that I had, that run play that I had shown you a little bit earlier. All right. But again, this was the reason that we were running this bunch. It was again to try to run the ball a little bit and to get this ball to him. Okay. Now, you don't get a good look on how they were jamming this over here. Okay, but there was another clip here, and I don't know if I kept this one in, but our point man here actually gets jammed pretty hard, and he doesn't do a good job of it at all. And I would say that would have been a point of emphasis to say, you got to make sure that guy is a guy who can get off the jam. This situation, we were pretty limited in the guys we could bring down, so it was a little bit of we had to kind of put in who we could. Okay, so the next look I wanted to show you, and again, I told you, it's like an offensive coordinator's dream, right? You're about to snap the ball. You got guys pointing everywhere. Like, they're confused. Okay, clearly they're confused. They don't know what we're going to necessarily do. We did run the bunch earlier in the game to see how they're going to react, and they they obviously had a tough time working this out. Okay. Now they come over late. Okay. But you can see that they overexpand to it. Okay. And then our outside receiver, okay, ends up getting that little window there. Okay. And I'm going to show you another play where we hit him as well. Okay. And again, this takes a lot of time. Okay. It's not like we just necessarily did that, just like in a day or even in a week. All right. We probably threw a pick a couple of times. We probably were looking at the wrong things and that sort of thing. The quarterback even gives a glance at the ISO over here. Okay. And had a second to do that before he looks back. Okay. But you can see, all right, that essentially he overexpands on this. He stays low and that opens up, okay, essentially that one zone. Now, you might look at these concepts. You can say, okay, well, they're running, essentially they're running verticals. All right. Okay. And yeah, that ends up being like a pretty deep throw, but okay, he ends up opening up again, just in about, just short of 10 yards. Okay. And the quarterback, he leads them really nice throw.
It's a great throw.
Okay. And again, he makes a nice move. And when it becomes that, I mean, now we're into the play basketball again, right? So now you put him in a good position catching the ball there, essentially with that one-on-one with the safety, and he needed someone to bail him out. Sorry, Coach. I know I'm pushing my time a little bit here, so I'll try to get through. I think I'm almost done. So here's another look with it. Okay. This is a different quarterback now. That's the other thing that I wanted to point out to you guys is, I don't know if you've noticed, but I think this is the fourth. Oh, he was actually in another clip, but I think it was one of the run clips. This is like the fourth quarterback. All right. That I've kind of shown with these examples, just to kind of show you that, like, this isn't necessarily like, okay, well, we had this guy and that's why we could do it. This is, did this with a couple of different guys and had a couple of different, I told you that there was a bit of an evolution, okay, in terms of what we were able to, or how we were able to do it over time. But I wanted you to see that it wasn't just about one guy. I will say the same receiver ends up making this catch. Sorry, guys. But as far as the quarterback throwing it, it's a different kid. Okay, so here, all right, you can see, so now so you can see that the backer here who's expanding, okay, he's jumping a slant, okay, and again, this is something we practiced, all right, and he needed to be ready for the ball in certain spots. And one of the things we practiced was be ready for the ball at 10 yards, okay, and you can see this is actually probably a better example than the last one in terms of how this really isn't that deep of a throw, even though the concept might be, that he's that like essentially vertical. He ends up running, okay, up this seam here, okay. But we put the ball here, all right. He catches that ball. Let's see how far off the line is he on the catch. 30. He's what? I think it was 9 yards, 8 or 9 yards. He makes that catch, okay, and then he gets taken down probably. How far was he off this one? Let's see. He gets an extra, 6, 7, 8 yards. All right. Again, it really was not, it's not a deep completion, but we get downfield. All right. Now, I think this is the last clip I have, because again, I'm going over my time here, so sorry about that. But I told you about how, when we were playing these guys, they were very focused on a run again. And on this one, this was supposed to be a little bit more of a play action. We don't really get the play action look necessarily, but you'll see our fullback leaks out of the backfield. All right. They bite completely. All right. And step up on it, and they realize it too late. Okay. And we hit him over the top for a touchdown. Again, I think that, in this example here, now we're using our backs in a little bit of a different way. And that's why I wanted to show this clip as well. So yeah, I did tell you that, football 101, if you can run the ball and you've got numbers and stuff, sure, like that, you do that. But here, use it to your advantage as well, right? So they jump up on it. We had this play action look in, and it obviously worked very much to our advantage. Okay, they bit right up on us. The other thing that I wanted to mention, as far as going back to how I started this and talking about all the assistant coaches. Again, the defensive coordinators, so I drew so many of these things up. We talked about so much of this stuff, But this play design actually came from, so our head coach ran a play action look one of the first years I was at STM when Claudio was still running the offense, and he had a look where his back ran a seam out of the backfield. And when I was putting this together, I actually said, you know what, I really, really like that look. How do we incorporate it into the offense? And I was like, oh, you know what, maybe in the bunch. And that's kind of how it happened. So, again, that's, those are conversations that happen, years before, and things that happened years before, but they ended up, in kind of this moment. So, again, I wanted to bring up those guys just because, they're such a huge part in developing all these things. But so that's those are all the clips. That's everything I have for you to give you, kind of an idea of how the bunch has worked for us. In a couple of different ways. Also, how we used it in TMO as well, and how it was advantageous in some ways. I'll take a couple questions. Obviously, there's still some questions, but if anyone wants to get a hold of me, by all means, shoot me an email, or you can follow me on Twitter there, and I'll hopefully I can answer them.
Yeah, thanks, Coach. That was great, and kind of just letting you guys go with that one. It was nice to sit back and watch and take a look at some of the stuff that did pop up in the chat. I think you answered most of them, which is great. And thanks for all the work that went into that presentation. I know, there's a lot of detail there, and a subject. I think if you kind of skate over it, people can lose the significance of it. But this is such a good deep dive. On that there. I do want to get us to our next guy and try and keep us on track, but there was a couple of really good questions here in the chat, and let me know if you guys have already answered these. I was back and forth between our social media and stuff, so I didn't hear everything that you guys went through, but I
think we got to everything, Jackson.
Oh, perfect. That's great. Like Coach said, guys, I had never met Rob, and I reached out to him on Twitter, and we went back and forth about doing this. He's a really approachable guy, and our numbers on here, Coach, in terms of these live things, you never know how it's going to do. That was really, really well attended from just taking a quick look at what we got there. So glad lots of people were there to check it out. And like we said, if you've got any more questions for Coach, feel free to reach out to him, and he's a really available, really accessible guy, and I appreciate that. It's hard. Like, I think right now we're all trying to find more resources, and the more kind of connections we can make, the better. So thanks a lot, Coach. And if anyone has any questions or anything else you want to learn about Punch or what else they're doing at STM, they score points in a lot of ways. It's not just Punch. But if you're looking for anything else, they're one of the best programs in the country. And thanks a lot, Coach Fuch, for helping us out.
Thanks again, guys. I really appreciate the invite. All the other coaches that are on, wish all those guys luck, and definitely everybody all the best going forward. So thanks again for having me.
Awesome. Thanks, Coach. I'm going to let Coach Smart in here, and we're going to start talking about hopefully trying to stop people from scoring points, switch the tune a little bit to quarters and tri-lock. So thanks a lot, Coach Rob, and we'll see you later.
Thanks.
All right, just letting Coach Smart in here, guys. It's just going to take us a sec to flip over. There you go, Coach. Thanks for being flexible with us there. We're still trying to work out all this YouTube live stuff and scheduling. I think it's going to work, honestly, even better if all the people who are already on, if we just keep going. So you should be able to share your screen. If you want to try and share your screen, I'll let you know when it comes up, and it's good to go. Just a couple of housekeeping notes, guys. For everyone who's watching, I know that was a great presentation, our previous presentation there. If you enjoyed it, make sure you help us out, subscribe to what we're doing. It's free. We're going to keep it that way. We want to help people get more knowledge about the Canadian game, and so help us out, subscribe. We've gone already in that last video, we got 5 new subscribers, which is amazing. And like the video, and I hate asking for this stuff, but it just helps us reach more people. The more people who like the video, the more YouTube will send it to other people to say, hey, you might enjoy this. And it actually helps us a ton when we look back at like which videos helped us reach more people. The more likes they have, it's a huge difference in the algorithm in terms of more people getting to see this. So, Coach, your presentation is up there, and I'm really excited for this one because this is like a fundamental aspect of what I like to do defensively. And when you kind of brought doing this up, I was really excited. So our second panel today, before we break for dinner, is Coach Brad Smart. Coach Smart, coach with the Oshawa Hawkeyes, he's also coached town high school football, and I'll let him introduce himself in a sec. But it's actually the second video he's done for us. He did a great one on defensive game planning. I think back then we were all hoping we'd be game planning right now, using some of that, coach. But obviously we're still waiting here in Ontario, at least, to get that going. So thanks for joining us again, coach. And if you want to kind of let the people know who you are and where you coach, and then we'll dive into quarters and tri-law coverage.
Thanks very much for having me on again, Jackson. It's great to be here, and thank you everybody for tuning in. I know it's kind of geared toward the high school crowd, and here in Ontario, many of us are high school teachers. So finishing off your delayed break, thank you for taking the time if you're with us. It's actually maybe a bit of a good segue, as just finishing listening to Coach Fuciarelli's talk on bunch, and that final clip there. I have to admit that was one of the teams that I was assisting with at the time, I believe, in the OFSA Bowl. So it's a little brings up some painful memories, but I have been coaching here in Oshawa in the Durham region in Ontario here for about 13 years or so, on and off at the high school level, mostly with a couple of different schools depending on where I've been working. Paul Dwyer from Oshawa and St. Mary and Pickering. So that's been great to get a couple of different perspectives, working with different players, different coaches, finding out different schemes and so on. And then about 5 or 6 years ago, getting involved with the club ball here, with the Oshawa Hawkeyes, primarily at the senior varsity level. Just beginning out as a positional coach originally, and then moving into the defensive coordinator role, and now head coach with the senior varsity team. And it was probably around that time, actually, from the last clip, where just trying to, again, develop as a coach myself. In speaking with my former coaches at Laurier, Coach Ron Van Morker, who I know tunes into all these clinics and sessions, and spoke at the Laurier Clinic just a couple of weeks ago, does a phenomenal job of keeping up to date and really having excellent defensive schemes. And of course, Coach Dwayne Cameron, which really served as an excellent mentor for me and showed me a lot of these concepts and introduced a lot of these concepts to me, that influenced me to completely kind of revamp what I was doing, which was based primarily of what I learned from my playing days, and then start to incorporate that at the high school level, different concepts when I again was available to coach, depending on what position I was in with my job, but then bringing that to our club team, and of course all high school players, many of which that I did coach in the fall. So they were somewhat familiar with these concepts, and in the last few years, it's certainly made a big difference in our pass game performance, but also these concepts, so quarters and tri-lock, still make run defense available as well. I think in coaching and through the last couple of years, since we switched from maybe a more conventional cover 3, cover 1 type look that a lot of high schools run, and showing these different looks, it has made us more successful. And a couple of years ago, we were successful in our first year of really switching our scheme over. There you see contact information as well if you care to get in touch if you do have any questions or would just like to talk more about these coverages. So just to kind of introduce the concept of quarters coverage and cover 4, as it's alluded to as well. A lot of times I think that when people hear cover 4, they're thinking that it's simply prevent defense, and that's really a bit of a misnomer. You can certainly use it as a prevent defense, end of a half, end of a game, whatever the situation is, but that's not all it's meant for. And quarters, I'll go through some of the benefits and the challenges as well here in a minute, but just to get everybody on the same page, not knowing what everyone's background is and their experience using this type of coverage, we're really taking away the vertical routes. We want to take away those deep shot plays or discourage them as much as possible. And so we're taking 4 zones across the field to cover depth, and that could be anywhere from 15 plus yards. You can choose whatever depth you wish, and then really forcing teams to, if they're going to complete passes on you, to throw underneath, come up and rally and make a tackle, but still being sound in the run game. So our zones are a little different. Again, we have our 4 deep zones. The wall flat areas, I'll talk about those players here in a minute. Your hook to curl areas and your hole area where, depending if you're bringing pressure or not, and that hole zone might be a little bit deeper in the field, but just in convention, okay, if we only have one underneath defender in that middle there, then that's where that zone becomes available. And our 0 to 5 yards is essentially what we're happy with giving up. Again, in the Canadian game, with only having 3 downs to get 10 yards, if there's any kind of radical underneath route, we're just going to let that go and trust that we have sound technique and our tackling ability to come up and make a play. So that's why I use, the green means go ahead and forget about it for you Office fans. So just dropping a typical scheme that we like to run. Of course, our field corner will be that deep defender as the field half is already essentially in that wall flat zone. We like to drop our Sam out, or we refer to him as the dime, more of a kind of hybrid linebacker, defensive back, and he'll play the inside quarter to the field. Our free safety will rotate over to the weak side, inside quarter of the field, and our boundary corner will typically drop back into that outside quarter. Okay, that leaves our halfbacks up to play the wall flat zones. Our Mike and our Will play those hook to curl areas, reading run first, and then dropping into their depth. Okay. Now, the key with the wall flat players here is that they're not chasing out to the flat as we normally would be in a cover 3 look, for instance. Because we have one less underneath defender versus a cover 3, we're not going to expand those outside defenders quite as much. So that is a weakness in playing cover 4 quarters, or a challenge, I should say, for teams that want to throw out to the flats quite a bit. Okay. With the wall aspect of those players, if there's any crossers that begin coming underneath, we want to collide, reroute, and delay, disrupt the timing. It's not a jam, but it's something that takes those receivers off their routes, disrupting the timing so that they're not in the window that the quarterback expects them to be. And we can pass that off to our Mike and our Will, our inside backers there. Okay. So some of the benefits of playing quarters and kind of what I've come to recognize here, like I already mentioned, it's going to discourage or take away the vertical passing game. We want to take away the big play, right? With teams that are throwing the ball or going for those big shots, that's a chunk yardage very quickly gives us big problems. With the Canadian game having a longer field, wider field, we're going to force them to nickel and dime us a little bit and expect at some point that there's going to be a throw that's missed or a pass drop, and that puts us in an advantage ahead of the sticks. At the very least, if they're throwing underneath, we can come up and rally and make a tackle, and then that extends drives, again offering that more opportunity for us to hopefully make a play, get off the field, win on first down, and give us a better idea on second and long. It's likely a throwing down. Despite the fact that we're dropping 4 players into coverage, by playing quarters, we still can maintain numbers in the run game. So I'll just go back to that first slide just briefly here for a second. You'll see that in that underneath zone, as much as we have the front 4, and that's what I've based this out of, is that's been our base package mostly, but this can obviously, of course, be run out of a 30 front. We still have 8 defenders that can add into the box to defend in the D gap with our halfbacks, and then those corners, once they read run, well, they can come up and force to the outside areas. So despite the fact that we're dropping 4 into coverage in order to discourage the vertical passing game and the big play, those chunk plays, we're still able to maintain our numbers in the run game as well. And again, that's all dependent on your technique and tackling ability. Anything is limited. Your coverage, your scheme is always limited by your fundamentals. So is only effective, I guess, as your fundamentals. So that's, of course, the caveat. Another advantage is it limits the effectiveness of the pre-snap motion by an offense. Also kind of building off of what Coach Fuciarelli was just talking about with the bunch formations. As much as he threw a shout out to defensive coordinators, how in the Canadian game we can be a little bit more creative in our formation and our coverages and schemes and so on. Well, obviously, so can offenses. Using bunch is just one way, but the pre-snap motion from teams switching strength of field and numbers from maybe a 32 to 23 or 23 to 40, whatever the case might be. There's all kinds of opportunities with the unlimited motion, and playing quarters, again, is a way to keep things in front of us without having to change responsibilities and result in errors in communication and blown coverages that result in those big plays. It was mentioned already that in the first session that teams will have different rules and adjust to motions with different play calls. And that's something as a defense that we can have that advantage of tagging different strategies to when we see that motion, how are we going to treat it? Is it going to be a halfback over, a rock and roll where we're rotating the free and half, exchanging the free and half, sorry, or are you stringing the linebackers, or are you just leaving it, right? And sometimes leaving it could be a valid strategy, and quarters coverage allows us to be a little bit more simplified when we're seeing that pre-snap motion, in particular when there's exchanges between receivers behind the line of scrimmage. If it happens post-snap, that's not a big deal either. And that's also, again, one way we could handle bunch, for instance, is letting that take place in front of us and then coming up and making the play. The nice advantage and why it also helps in the run game is that our covered players are able to keep their eyes upfield versus playing man coverage where now their backs are turned as everyone's responsible for trailing or for covering whoever their receiver is. Now by playing cover 4, as you'll see in some of the clips, the defensive backs in particular can have their eyes in the backfield and reading and taking a peek to read, run, or pass, but still maintaining their leverage deep and be able to come up and play the run in the case that the ball is handed off. Okay, they're not trailing with their backs turned and they're missing out what's going on behind them. Quarters allows us to keep our eyes upfield, look into the backfield, scan into the backfield, I should say, while still maintaining our coverage responsibilities. Again, this is a big help in the run game. The variations out of the same look. So on that first slide, I organized things out of a single high look, which I think at certainly the high school level, you're capable of running quarters out of. It gives that pre-snap look of the middle of the field closed, so the quarterback and the offense expects to see probably a cover 3 look or a man cover 1. However, we can run different variations now by changing where the free safety, where the Sam is going, the corners or the halves exchanging roles, kind of like a cut and hold in cover 3. But we can run different variations. I have a clip here, a couple clips where we actually drop a defensive end into coverage as well, and in order to bring pressure from a different spot. So the variations in players being able to go where the quarterback isn't expecting them to, that throws a different wrinkle into his read, certainly post-snap, from something that he's been regularly seeing and something that can fairly easily be added in as long as we get those base rules covered off and your players understand that. So it allows for different variations of coverage to be played with defenders going to different spots. I think the last one that I have here, and I just mentioned it, is it still allows for the opportunity to bring 5-man pressure while being sound in coverage. So our base is out of a front 4. Again, whether you run it out of a 30 front, that's even better if you decide to just run 3. But you can still bring that extra guy, bring that 5-man pressure, and not being worried about having to play man behind it, which can put some of your coverage players at a bit of a compromise. And we'll show a clip of that. Now, of course, anything doesn't come without its challenges. So things that as a coach you need to be aware of and identify in your pre-scout, what our offense is doing. Are they overloading the underneath zones? Again, because we're drawing an extra defender into a deeper zone versus say a cover 3 or a cover 2 zone look. Well, the underneath zones may become overloaded, but we're really challenging our guys then once the ball's in the air to rally to the ball, get 12 hats in the picture, as I like to say. Mentioned that the throws to the flats are going to be more available to offenses, but we're willing to, from a defensive perspective, is if that's what we're giving up, that's what we're okay with. We'd rather cover off the middle of the field in our underneath zones and take away the verticals as best as possible, because the throws to the flats, they're going to be in the air much longer, gives our our guys more time to get out there and make a play on the ball, or certainly come up and tackle. And because it's in that underneath area, hopefully, we're not giving up too many yardage on first down, and we're still at least in that area on second down where we can switch up our play call and make it a bit more challenging. The bubble screens. So again, at a different formation for those quick screens, whether it's to the slot or to the wideouts. Who's going to be the shoot player? Who's coming down? Who's going to be pressuring that? And who's going to be the vertical player that stays back? Once teams set up the screen, they like to throw the screen and goes, or whatever the case may be. So being aware in the communication of who's going to go, because certainly that's a play, especially at the high school level. We saw in the last session there about players jumping on the run game. Well, essentially a screen is just like a wider run play or a quicker run play. So it's not getting too excited about everybody jumping on that. We want to make sure that we have the appropriate player staying back, and that's a communication piece between the players involved in that area of the field, usually the corner or the half, or it might be the dime or the free as well. So who's staying back, but we still need to make sure that somebody's identified in order to shoot down and disrupt. It can be challenging in the play action. Again, play action, drawing the inside linebackers forward in particular, that leaves the middle area of the field in those underneath zones a little bit more accessible. So by a good strong play action look, that can be a bit challenging, as again, we're removing one of those underneath defenders. And the rub routes downfield. Once vertical routes have been declared, if they exchange, so like in scissor concepts, for instance, that can be challenging to cover off, as well as probably just as equally any late breaking vertical routes. As much as I said earlier that we're going to ignore the radical inside releases, well, that player all of a sudden turns upfield, and that might be, for instance, on a wheel route. We're all familiar with that, but even on an inside breaking route that all of a sudden turns upfield, well, that adds another vertical player after all the other receivers have basically designated where they're traveling to. So those are the challenges as well to keep in mind. But establishing your rules in quarters and having players clear on what their responsibilities are, we can really take advantage of at least limiting the big play while still being sound in the run game, and then forcing offenses to chip away, and ultimately we can change our call at any point. So just have some clips coming up here to kind of go over what we do and how we played it. You'll see a couple variations. The first one is pretty straightforward, just to give the idea of where the drops would be. Okay, so we see that in the, sorry guys, in terms of our technique, our defensive back technique. Sorry guys, I don't know what's forward there. Okay, we're going to see that the eyes are able to remain in the backfield. We can read what's happening, get a good run pass read, okay, and we're still sound in our depth defenders. Okay, just to highlight where our players are moving to. So we're first and long here. Our field corner is going to bail. Our free safety is already positioned over to the weak side to take that inside quarter away. And our Sam here, I'd like to line him up at about 7 to 8 yards. He's a little bit deep here, but he's going to be our inside quarter to the strong side. Our halves, as you see, are going to be our wall flat players, and they're not bailing to the flat right away. They're holding their seam to collide and reroute if needed, and then being able to come up and rally to the football. So if I kind of just pause it here, now we had a bit of a bad snap on the play by the offense, so that helps. But there are 4 underneath defenders, again, zone, so we can keep our eyes to the backfield and read. We're giving up this throw to the flat here and waiting on it, and that's fine because we can rally, but we have our 4 deep defenders and our free is out of the picture already. Okay, now just to roll this through, it ends up being a throwaway because everything is covered downfield. For this clip here, what I would like to make note of is, I addressed earlier that cover 4 isn't just a prevent defense. Okay, what I say to my players, don't guard grass. So down at the bottom of the screen with our boundary corner, he does a great job. He's not getting pushed vertically, so there's no need for him to just turn and bail like we would in maybe a prevent situation. and he gets rewarded for it. So we're still going to be in quarters here, and just pause it for a moment, where our boundary hat, our corner is going deep, our half is staying in that curl to wall flat area. Our Sam is going to rotate up versus a 32, and our field corner, again, as our depth player along with our free. So in this situation, there's really nobody vertical. They're just throwing a common route concept, get rhythm early in the game here, just throwing hitches all the way across. Now, if our corner just bails and goes, so here's a technique point, a teaching point. And one of the drills that we do as defensive backs just about every day, every practice, they already know, is a 1-2-3 slow. Now, I prefer using and teaching a shuffle technique that allows the eyes to be inside, to take that scan into the backfield and get your read, while still maintaining eyes on your receiver and your coverage responsibility. Versus a pedal, it's more important, I find, for the inside defenders. But as we see here, I'll play it real time versus slow motion. If you watch his first couple of strides, those are his read steps, 1, 2, 3. He knows everything is kept in front of him. We get a great drive on the ball for the interception, and I won't show where he gets pushed out of bounds by the quarterback. Again, we're in good shape.
Sorry, don't want to break your rhythm here. This is great. There was 2 questions in the chat, and I think you'll probably get to them, but this is a really clear clip of 32. And if you have this later in the presentation, we'll just get to it when you get to it. But some coaches have just been asking about how does the responsibilities change if the formation changes. So whether it's 23 or 2 backs or whatever the offense ends up presenting there. The second question was about match principles. So maybe we'll save that for the tri-lock conversation.
Yeah. So the tri-lock is where I'll get more into the match concepts. As far as different formations, again, that really depends on how you're going to adjust. Like I mentioned earlier, there are different ways to roll that. I'll show a look versus quads 41 here in a moment. We'll probably just advance to that here. Actually, we saw that clip. Versus 23, what I like to do is, and how we've treated it, is we'll bring our Sam over, and our Sam and free work off of one another. So our Sam, or our dime, how I call it, he'll track the fullback or what becomes the number 3 receiver. Our dime may end up into the boundary, if that's where the trips is, versus 23. And then the free and dime are just exchanging responsibilities. They're working off of one another. Again, you could half back over, you could rock and roll, in other words, bring the half up top and roll the free down low, or exchange sides that way. So there's lots of different ways that you can adjust your coverage, and just making sure that versus different formations, your players are very clear on the rules. But I found the easiest way to kind of keep things consistent, if we see that trips to the boundary look, like 23 or maybe even 13, we don't see a lot of that. But to bring the dime over, like I said, he's already a little bit deeper depth, so he can track over with that motion, in particular if it's just the inside receiver in motion coming over. And then the free and the dime just exchange responsibilities as to their deep inside quarter. So here's a look versus quads, for example. Again, we're not, in this case, we don't bring the half over. You certainly can. It's definitely an option. Instead, we're just going to basically cut this. So instead of our corner being the deep quarter player, we left our half on the same side of the field. You might roll them over top and bring the free safety down. We left our half more to the boundary to give that inside leverage or inside help in case the ISO ran the post. And so as we see here, our corner is going to maintain his outside leverage in this clip. At the top side, okay, we're still looking at our free and our dime and our field corner, taking away the 3 verticals now. So our free is able to rotate more to the field side in that drop versus what he would normally be focused to the boundary side. We do see here that, again, out of the vertical routes, we see number 4 and number 2 end up going vertical, which are covered off. Our field corner is back here. We're giving up the flats underneath. Now we bust this a bit. Our mic turns and runs, so there might have been an error in getting the call there. Again, showing mistakes here because they happen. But our half is staying as the wall flat here. Our wheels can bump into that whole area. And we're leaving the flats, but that's a pretty long throw. Remember, our field corner is back here. He could drive if they wanted to throw that field out. They end up going with the underneath here into the slot and right into where our half is sitting. He drives on it, makes a good play, and disrupts the ball. Here's a play where, just to highlight, forcing the throw underneath. So this is versus 22. And actually this clip addresses what I've talked about. So even though it's 22 balanced in the receiver set, they're in a pistol formation here with the fullback set to the boundary, or what we considered the boundary in this case. It kind of looks middle of the field, but I guess, but initially it looked more to the boundary. But we see that our dime is flipped over. So now he would be dropping to the weak side where he's tracked where the fullback is, and our free would be exchanging over to the field side. Okay, we see that again, our corner is looking inside leverage still, because again, that field side is a wide throw, and we're rallying inside out from the flat. Let's go back here, sorry, it keeps advancing on me. Okay, I'll just pause it for a moment here. As we see, our half is keeping inside leverage to be able to wall in case that receiver breaks inside at depth. Remember, if he were to break inside right by the line of scrimmage, we're going to leave that. Instead, that receiver breaks to the out. So now this is where we're going to chase the flat. He does a great job coming up and underneath. Our corner is now able to drive and help out as well. I believe the line of scrimmage was originally the 20. We do a great job coming up and making the tackle. Again, on first and long, that's a couple yard gain. We win second down, or we win first down, sorry. Now we can anticipate pass on second down. And I leave the final play here that I'll show just the variation where this is another bust, by the way. But now we're going to bring pressure with our Sam and Mike, and we're going to drop the end to be our wall flat player. Our boundary half and boundary corner are going to be our deep players. Our free will rotate to the field. Our field half stays low, and our boundary corner, of course, coming high. So as you see here, I'm sure any offensive coach will tell you that quarterback probably should have thrown to the number 3 here. If he did, that's okay. Either our half can bump in, or our free can still come down because we're covered over top. It's hopefully a minimal gain. Maybe we even still keep them and keep them short of the sticks. Our will should be the one that rotates over. I think if this will let me. So our will here should actually be rolling in behind where the blitz was, since we're dropping the boundary end away from the blitzing side. So that's just a variation there that we run with taking away or giving different looks and bringing different players. We're only bringing 5-man pressure, but we're still covered up in the pass game. We force the throw underneath, come up and make a tackle. Again, a little bit generous there with our yardage, but ultimately we get them to third down. All right, so the question that came in about match concepts. So now after we've taught our players and got them thinking into taking away quarter of the field in terms of our deep and taking away the vertical routes deep, and we're thinking in quarters now versus cover 3 zones, we can now blend that into the match concepts, and you can run match lots of different ways. I'm just going to talk about one today that we've used, and that's tri-lock. And the concept of tri-lock is we're going to take away one receiver and designate one player to follow him around. So it's a nice transition from the zone principles to starting to incorporate match and a little bit more man-to-man look. By designating a lock defender, now we're creating 3 versus 2 situations to the field and to the boundary. So we're outnumbering the receivers in coverage, and we're still remaining +1. Okay, like I mentioned, we've taught that and instructed and taught that mindset of 4 deep zone defenders to limit the vertical passing game. So we're maintaining that advantage. And also the defender's technique and footwork are going to be very similar to the quarter skills that we just talked about, the shuffle technique and having the eyes inside and being able to read in order to support the run game as well. So we're not teaching 2 different strategies. Obviously playing zone versus man, your individual techniques that your DBs require are going to be different. But by using these 2 schemes and concepts, the individual technique is very similar, as well as some of the reads, and we're getting the benefit of the zone and man concepts. So again, a lot of the benefits that quarters have, which I went through, but it also starts to limit some of the challenges. We can be a little bit more aggressive for throws to the flat as we're taking away, we're locking up with one defender that might remain in the flat and removing some of the area of the field that the other coverage defenders need to be responsible for. It also helps to limit the effectiveness of play action and the lack of coverage in underneath zones that sometimes we might face. Now, where the challenge is with playing match in this way, we play this tri-lock out of a read 2, or you might hear it referred to as palms, for instance. The cover 2 beaters can be susceptible, and I'll show a clip where we could be challenged a bit. If that outside quarter drives on the breaking route by number 2, then the corner route can be challenging for the number, or for the free safety, in order to get it over top of that vertical. So just to draw up kind of the scheme that we use here, and again, this is one variation. There's lots of different ways that you could run this, but our first player is our lock, and we use the field corner most often. Obviously, that's the longer throw. If the receiver is going to come inside, well, it's very important that we have somebody to account for that. We noticed that a lot of offenses that ran cover 3 beaters love that Z curl, and this is one way to take that away while still playing the zone principles in behind. So man everywhere he goes, or Meg, is our field corner in this case. So just looking at the field alone, we see that we have 3 defenders, the field half, the Sam, and the free, that are going to read what is the number 3 receiver that essentially becomes the number 2. We're ignoring the Z in this case, and now all of these 3 are going to match the route that is ran by the most inside receiver, and we have the Y that we'll respond to afterward. So there's our 3 versus 2 to the field. To the boundary side, we're incorporating it in the case where there's 2 receivers, so versus a 32 look. We have the boundary half and boundary corner that will be our leverage players deep, and our will that will, again, read the most inside receiver. We have a 3 versus 2 situation. We have the numbers in the passing game. With 1 back, we have our Mike becomes what we call the vertical hook player. So if that back releases and runs vertically down the middle of the field, that Mike is going to take, he becomes man-on-man coverage with the tail. If the tailback runs out to the flat, there are different ways that we can handle that. And we'll cover those rules here when we talk about our match principles. Just another quick variation as we've run this, I've used this as well. If that inside receiver, can be most often one of the more dangerous receivers that you'll see in high school, best athletes that have a lot of different spots now where they can run to. They can run to the corner, they can run the crossfield, deep post. So you might want to lock him up. We can do that with our free, and now our Sam, field half, and field corner are going to match number 1 and number 2. Okay, nothing changes here on the boundary, even though you certainly could, and I'll show a clip where we do run a variation here. Our Mike is still the vertical hook on the tail. Okay, now I did indicate here, because this is what we'll see in the clip. You could have your will be the inside leverage defender, okay, with our boundary half rotating over top, and the corner pinching in. Just another different look, another variation where it's difficult to read pre-snap as late as possible if you can help it, but it gives a different look, and you see that we take advantage of that in a moment. So these are the different reads for our inside and outside leverage players. So the number 1 and 2 are the receiver and the route concepts, and these of course might be more detailed and more specific, but generally we're going to get some type of these combinations. Our outside player is maintaining his outside leverage on the number 1, and our inside player maintains inside leverage on the number 2. If that number 2 were to run all the way across field, essentially what we're getting is 2 situations of match coverage to the field and to the boundary. So that inside player needs to make sure he goes completely the way that we run it. There are different ways where you can incorporate the free that reads from number 3 to number 2. But again, just kind of as an introduction, that's a more, I guess, complicated or detailed focus. Okay, with our curl player, he has a lot more variety in the things that he can do. Actually, sorry, I just want to go back because I forgot to mention. The second pattern that we see here is what becomes challenging for our players in coverage, sorry. Okay. So when we get a vertical route by the number 1, and an out-breaking route by the number 2, our outside leverage player is going to try and carry that as long as possible before driving on the out by number 2. This is where it puts the inside leverage player in a bit of a bind, especially if the vertical receiver sees that and has the option route of turning that into the corner. That's a very difficult play for the inside leverage player to get over top of, but it's also a longer throw as well. So it is a chance. Again, you're not going to take away absolutely everything in your coverage, but we're trying to eliminate most opportunities, but there is the one cover 2 beater similarity where it becomes a challenge. Our curl player is going to read number 2 as well. If everything goes vertical, he's just continuing to get depth underneath and look for anything coming out from the middle inside out. If the number 1 hitches up or runs an in-breaking route, that curl player is going to drive and wall if it's a crosser, or come out to the number 1 if he sits. If the number 2 releases inside on that radical inside release, so there's a commonality, that curl player gets depth and can play underneath an in-breaking route at depth by number 1, help to make that throw a little higher. As we see, if the number 2 runs the out-breaking route, the curl is going to get depth and allow the outside leverage player to drive on that, which was drawn up on the last slide. Here's where the curl player and the vertical hook may switch off. If that running back, if the tail runs to the flat, we're going to get a push call from the vertical hook player who will replace the curl, and the curl just rallies to the flat. So there's some switch concepts there, and that makes it also easier to implement in your man coverage schemes. Okay.
Hey, Coach, this is amazing. Thank you. I've been trying to get some of this out to our social media as we go. The depth and detail here is incredible. And I know you kind of touched on it, and one of the points that I resonated the most with me has been you're talking about the quarters beaters being one of the answers of why you like tri-lock. And for me, it's the same. We would play a ton of quarters, and then we would get teams that would throw the field side stop, right? And I'm telling my corner, hey, like you essentially we're giving that up, right? If they want to throw it, and if they can throw it, we're giving it up. And having this tool in your back pocket to then be able to drive that with, a locked player, a guy, someone that's, as you said, man everywhere they go. That's I think one of the big points. I know a few people that I've talked through this concept with all kind of agree with that as well. Is there any like other route concepts, like from a big picture standpoint, that you really like tri-lock for as opposed to quarters? I guess I don't know if that's the best worded question, but like if quarters is your base, what route concepts would you really like tri-lock against?
Like I said, those quarter beaters, like the scissor concepts where we have downfield crossing routes, because now we're a little bit closer with our vertical defenders who are reading that number two defender and know their leverage. They can latch on a little bit quicker downfield versus maybe a quarters where now they're exchanging and you don't know where essentially to go. Certainly, I like the tri-lock versus dagger routes where we might versus when we're playing quarters, somebody runs that dagger concept. If it doesn't get passed off correctly, then that can create that opening there versus a tri-lock where now once that player has declared vertical, our inside quarter is really going to ride him just all the way across the field. It becomes really man on deep downfield. So that's a good, I would probably go with those two right off the top of my head about where switching all of a sudden to tri-lock, if a team gets used to seeing quarters, you can take away those routes if they try and hit them a little bit later on.
Yeah, for sure. And just while we're going here, because we just had a bunch of new people kind of join in the last like 5-10 minutes. If you haven't yet, make sure you like the video because it helps more people. Some of those people may have had this shared with them or suggested through YouTube. It really helps us. If you're watching, if you're enjoying it, like the video because it'll help more coaches find it both now and down the road after we post it. So keep going, Coach. This is awesome. And if we go a little bit long, that's cool. I know we started a little bit late with yours as well. So this has been incredible stuff. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. I just had, so I have some clips here to kind of show, the kind of the lockup here for, our tri-lock and match coverage, as well as just some variations that we run that I didn't drop. So I'll try and go through these fairly quick. I appreciate everyone's time here and need to squeeze in dinner in a moment. But anyways, so just hopefully while we were chatting there, if you read over what the responsibilities of the vertical hook are, essentially it becomes almost like man on the tail, but we can push that route or switch off that route with the curl player if the back releases outside. So that's the big key here. So this clip here, just the first one, kind of just a general overview. We'll see a really good job at the top of the screen by our inside leverage defender. So down here, we end up with trips. Now this is where your pre-scout comes into play. We get a lot of, versus this team, we saw their R or 8, whatever you want to consider him. He would come in and just end up as a blocker, but he would also release downfield quite a bit. So we treated him as a receiver, which is why we stuck with our 3v2 rules versus a 22 look where the responsibilities become different. But as you'll see, he comes into the box a little bit late. So our curl player, which is our dime here, ends up just sticking in, and we have the lock here at the bottom of the screen. Okay, so I'll just kind of rewind a little bit close here. You'll notice that we're looking inside, so our field half at the bottom is looking inside, maintaining outside leverage. Our free is coming over to give him inside help in case we get a vertical inside release here. Our field corner is that lock player. He's not even looking at anything else. That's his responsibility no matter what. And our other players know that they have nothing to be concerned about with anything that the Z does. That's our field corner's responsibility. At the top of the screen, we see a great job, again, of inside leverage by our boundary half. They're trying to hit this post. He does a great job of keeping his leverage. Offensive coaches probably think that's a little bit of pass interference. Defensive coaches, absolutely not, as he has that right to the field. Receiver can't go through him. We also get a good head turn to follow the ball. This was his first year senior. Next year, he probably picks that off. Anyways, but just to emphasize that, especially with those inside quarter defenders or inside leverage defenders, it's critical that any inside breaking route, they need to carry that no matter what. They can't pass it off because the other side of the field has their own 3 versus 2 to consider. Here we're going to have a look at the underneath players, the vertical hook and our curl players doing a very good job of passing off routes. They try and run the mesh concept underneath. And actually, so the mesh concept, and speaking about tri-lock coverage and match principles, that can be challenging. We're seeing more and more of that implemented into offenses. But they do a really good job here. We see there are trips to the boundary. So here's our look versus 23. Our field corner is going to lock up. Our boundary half now becomes outside quarter leverage. Our free safety will be inside quarter, and we see our dime has tracked over to the boundary. That's how we played it. Again, different strategies. You can choose what works for you. At the top of the screen, we have our corner that will be our outside leverage. Our half will be inside leverage. They're both reading number 2, and what becomes our mic will be the curl player to the field in this situation. I think we're actually blitzing him. So we only end up with, we're giving up the vertical hook player. So really this player becomes the curl. As we see, he's reading number 2 and he's releasing radically inside. This will allow our top 2 defenders to double the vertical by number 1. We're locked here. Our boundary half, slips. He falls a bit here, but fortunately they're looking for this mesh route concept. And as we see players coming across the field, our dime and our what becomes our will just pass those on. We get a push and we drive on the route underneath. So we're still taking care of the vertical routes. We actually end up with great numbers, doubling almost every vertical, and we're sound underneath defensively. Here's another example, this time versus quads. So we talked about having a lock player to create a 3 versus 2. Well, if the offense shows up in quads, we're just going to add an extra lock player. In this example, we HBO'd, so there's our boundary half, or what would normally be our boundary half. He's coming over. Whether you want him to take number 4 and you bump the Sam out, or if there's enough time to get him out on number 3, again, that's in your pre-scout, that's in your rules that you can designate to your players. I think in this case, because they line up in it, they don't motion to it. We were able to get him out on the number 3, who essentially becomes our read player. So just to kind of diagram that quickly here, as you'll watch, you'll see that the field corner is going to lock up on number 1. Our field half has bumped out. He's going to be locked up on the number 2 receiver. And now our read players become what was the number 3 and the number 4. These are the 2 players that we're matching using our dime, our halfback, boundary half that's come over, and our free safety. Get this out of the way. So now to accommodate for the quads, we're going to just lock up 2 players, and we end up with a 3v2. They try and throw the seam inside of that skinnier post, but we keep our inside leverage. Our curl player also does a nice job. Again, the number 1 hitches up, so he's just going to drive on that from inside out. That's covered off. We get that bracket in case that route stayed more to the field side. We have our outside leverage defender that can help. He can try and get over and help out as best as possible. We're locked up here on the top. We see we do a good job of driving on that post route, maybe a little bit thrown behind, but we'll get those, we'll take that, and the pass is disrupted. I'm going to show you a situation here where we handle it well, but where if our read player where a vertical player, if he ran the corner route, it would be difficult for our inside leverage player to get over top of. We're also going to see where we bring a variation here. So we're bringing the free safety and we're bringing the will. We can bring 5-man pressure out of tri-lock. We're going to drop our field end. Now, again, your personnel, you have to figure out if that's going to be a good thing or a bad thing. I was very fortunate in the case where I had 2 ends that I was more than comfortable dropping into coverage. Both had linebacker experience as well, so that always helps. So I'll let it kind of roll through here. The throw ends up coming to the boundary, but we'll highlight the top of the screen in a second. So we get the pressure. We get a little bit of the good, the bad, and the ugly here. So let's start off with the good. Focusing at the top of the screen, our read player is really the number 3 receiver. So we get an out-breaking route. Our inside leverage player, our outside leverage player, my apologies, which is our field half, is going to hold the vertical as long as he can. Our dime has become the inside leverage player, replacing the free. So there's another situation where the free and the dime really work off of one another nicely as we're bringing the free on pressure. That outside leverage player is going to drive on the out-breaking route. Our D end is that curl player. Doesn't do a terrible job of getting out there into space. And we see the vertical here. Now, at this point, if this was to be a corner route and the quarterback had time, this becomes a real challenge for that inside quarter player to get over top of that and defend. So there's where the challenge is in playing the match or in tri-lock. Now, depending on what route you get from your lock player, if he stayed underneath, that corner is going to be there. But because we got some depth here, our lock corner might be able to get off of that and help out with the corner route in this situation once the ball's in the air. On the field side, this is where we bust. But again, the benefit of having 3 versus 2 is that at the very least, we're in man coverage down here where our half is driving on the vertical route. Our corner, who is expecting help on this underneath, really our Mike should have rolled over to the boundary side and become the curl player and taken that inside breaking route. He kind of drops into that hole zone instead, or sits. We want that Mike to get underneath this in-breaking route and replace the curl, which was the will that we brought in addition to the free. So that's the bad. We bust the coverage. But again, we're not in terrible shape because we're still matched up in numbers. We get the inside throw. There's the ugly. We drop the ball. That's why he's a DB, not a receiver. Drop ball, right? The very good, to finish off on a positive, you'll notice at the top of the screen, the outbreaking route turns into a wheel and we run with it. That's an excellent point there. Always run with the wheel. I'll play it real time. So focusing at the top, the outbreaking route originally turns into a wheel. Our outside leverage player sticks with it. Here's another example of a variation, and I wish the film was from higher up. We're going to get a situation where we had scouted that this team liked to throw a lot of hitches early, especially at the beginning of the game. This is the first play of the game, so we're in our tri-lock call. We're going to pinch the corner. Instead of having him as our outside leverage defender and deep defender, we're going to send our will into as our inside leverage, and our boundary half becomes the outside leverage player. What this allows the corner to do is to sit on those hitches. And again, we get a drop ball situation here. But this is first play of the game that really, I think, deterred them from going back to one of their favorite route combinations. Our corner is going to drive, and we see our will and our boundary half becomes those deeper quarter defenders. Our corner drives on the hitch, drops this one, but fortunately I can't rip him too hard. He made 2 interceptions later in the game, 1 for a touchdown. But just a wrinkle that you can add into your match coverage responsibility as well. I think the final one here, again, just shows that versus the run game, we can still be stout, even though we think that, okay, by being +1 in our cover, we're going to be sacrificing versus the run. That's not necessarily the case. And again, because the benefit by playing off and having our receiver or having our coverage players' eyes upfield, we're able to read that handoff, read the triangle. We get a good kind of leverage from our DN that keeps outside leverage and helps to bubble that out. And now we're in good pursuit from our will and our half that is able to come up, leave his guy. We tackle him for a loss. So even in the tri-lock, just as much as quarters, we get that benefit and coverage in the run game as well. So kind of just to summarize and bring things together, why using a combination of this is important. Again, we get the benefits of zone and man coverage principles. Number 1, by interchanging our call from quarters to tri-lock. Probably maybe the most important, we discourage the vertical passing game, but we're still gap sound versus the run game, because we saw we can add up to 8 in the box even and still have 4 deep in coverage, depending on who your underneath defenders end up being. I like this because the individual technique for your players is very similar versus zone and man concepts, which are basically 2 different techniques. They can play these concepts and schemes, but maintain a pretty similar individual technique, which helps in your planning for indie drills and your players' understanding of what their roles are on the field. And finally, again, either coverage, it can look the same. So pre-snap, we want to make it as challenging as possible for the quarterback and the offense to read what it is that we're doing. If we can make things look the same and then drop into something else, whether it's different variations, pressure, whatever, 5-man pressure, whatever the case might be, exchanging who your depth defenders are and underneath defenders, well, again, that makes it challenging, and a defender ends up being where the quarterback doesn't expect them to. So there's kind of the summary of the benefits of using these in collaboration with one another. Again, just the contact there. If there's any questions or would like to chat more about that, I know that was kind of pretty quick and just a base overview of using the 2 schemes together.
No, that was great, Coach. I think I got about 4 texts from guys saying, hey, like this is, such, a lot of them were familiar with the concepts already and just enjoying hearing you talk about it. But, the detail there, and I think the connections between the 2 is so important. Like, that's why we love it. Like, the summer program I coach with in Cambridge, we have similar influences, obviously me coming from Laurie as well with Coach Cam and Coach V. It's really, I've found, like, obviously you're going to have your cover 1 stuff and, everyone's got to play some man. But like quarters and tri-lock has been the majority of our coverage menu. And like you said, having guys play, in similar leverages and in similar techniques, but like the slide that I love the most was, you moving around who the locked guy was. That's something we've done. Like some teams that play a fullback in the slot, we've said, hey, let's just man that guy up. We can cover that guy with our Sam. We don't need any help, to cover that guy. Let's play 3-on-2 on the outside instead of, playing 3-on-2 on the inside, or, being able to play that to a side because you're getting a lot of quick game. And, like you said, you're able to relate to those receivers down the field a little tighter because it's more like a match principle or man match principle as opposed to the zone of quarters. So really, really great job. There's no questions that have come up in the chat. There's been lots of, great conversation, just, basically people agreeing with a lot of the things that you said. There is one here, Pick 6 Athletics, which is an account that we're going to do some work with soon. Do you find it more effective having a uniform pre-snap alignment or changing it up and having players moving around? I guess that's not specific, directly to quarters and tri-lock, but just defensively in general.
I guess one of the, kind of the benefits that I noted there is, for me, and again, there's no right or wrong. I like having as much uniform pre-snap as possible. regardless of what cover you're playing, whether it's, quarters, tri-lock, cover one, cover three, cover two even, the later that you can drop and show what you're doing pre-snap, the more difficult it becomes for an offense, I feel. You can also certainly intentionally show different looks, but then drop to the same coverage that you've been playing. That's all part of the chess game of coaching, I find. So for me, I find that I've been most successful when I've tried to keep the pre-snap picture the same, but then rotate into different spots. And certainly as you get into the higher levels, certainly obviously university and some of the better teams at high school and club ball, that might be more difficult to do because just their players are more skilled. As the skill level increases, there's going to be times where you just can't hold this one pre-snap look and then drop into something else. You're going to have to show it earlier just to put your guys in a position to be successful. So it really depends on, I guess, the competition that you're facing, and also the capability of your athletes. I've been very fortunate to have some really great secondaries and some individuals the last few years, many of whom have gone on or are going on into the U Sport level, or otherwise. And so that has made it very easy as a coach to try and do some of these things. But just a personal perspective, if I can make things look the same as much as possible, it's more difficult for the offense to get a read, since a lot of those things are coming more and more now pre-snap based on what what the defense is doing. The offense is going to make those calls. So the more that we can confuse them, the advantage we have after the snap, and we can just play football.
For sure. And I think you touched on some of this at the start, but is there a reason outside of personnel, like playing a 40 front or a 30 front, that you like for running quarters? Like, what's your main, like, why be a quarters based team?
It didn't have so much to do with our front personnel. Again, we were a 40 team just strictly because of the players that I had at D-line. That's something in the last year, in this time here, that I've actually, that's one of my, I guess, coach development tasks is to implement a 30 package more regularly, because I don't know what kind of athletes I'm going to be getting out of this situation when finally we can be back on the field, and I want to be prepared. So in terms of our D-line, it really had no influence. It was just the fact that I had 40 linemen, actually 5 or 60 linemen at any given time, that I was more than comfortable putting them on the field, which allowed me to do maybe more flexible things in our coverage. Even running a 30 personnel, if you're low on D linemen, you can still run quarters behind that, because now you can bring those, more athletic bodies, bring defensive backs from different spots in order to generate your pressure, but still be sound in coverage behind it. Again, I've switched over to quarters as a base and tri-lock in the last few years. Not so much based on personnel, just because I think you can run it with any personnel, and especially if you don't have the burners in the secondary to match up with the receivers, you're already putting them at an advantage of playing off, giving a little bit of cushion, and allowing them to see what's happening in front of them, instead of trying to just be out athleted basically. So I think really it doesn't matter so much on your personnel. I think it can be ran no matter what personnel you have, and just using it correctly and not putting your guys in bad spots. Like I showed a couple clips of our DNs dropping into coverage. I knew they could do that because I've seen them play linebacker in different times and so on. But if I had DNs that just they weren't able to cover well, I don't know that I would use that as much. But ultimately, the scheme can still be the same.
Yeah, absolutely. Great coach. And again, thanks so much for your presentation. And the coaches here, I think, especially in Ontario, can echo that statement of, not being sure of exactly what you're going to have coming out of this. Now summer coaches, this will be 2 years. I have whole guys that I was excited for coming out of JV that I haven't played it. Well, we were able to do some stuff last summer, and hopefully we will this summer too, but haven't played a real down in our uniform. Yeah. So I think the versatility is huge. Thanks again, coach. Really appreciate it. Guys, if you haven't yet, please like the video. It helps more people find it. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. We're a free resource for Canadian athletes and coaches. We're going to stay that way. Getting to 1,000 YouTube subscribers lets us monetize, and maybe we'll be able to afford a little more in terms of making some of our production stuff look a little bit better. But it'll help us a ton if you help us out by subscribing, like the video, and we'll be back at 6 with a quarterback development session, and then 6:30 with a quarterback development session, and then 6 or 7:30 talking linebacker development with a guy I know that you know pretty well, Coach Smart, Coach Magicomo from Jacob Hespeler, another Laurier linebacker alum. And then we'll be doing our head coach roundtable at 8:30 Eastern. So thanks again, Coach. This has been great, and my phone's blowing up, so I appreciate it.
Thanks, Coach. Thank you, everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.